Our next teacher has been a Bitcoin developer for more than 4 years and has made contributions to the ecosystem such as Neutrino, which is BIP 157 and WIP 158. He's the co-founder and chief technology officer of Lightning Labs, the lead developer of LND, one of the main implementations of Lightning, and has recently committed to creating the first open source book about the Lightning Network with myself and Rene Picard, mastering the Lightning Network. You may know him best as Roast Beef. It's my great pleasure to introduce Olaoluwa Osuntokun.
Great, thank you. Cool. All right, so I guess quick show of hands initially, who attended any of Renee's talks prior? So you do have some, okay, cool, thank you. So hopefully you're warmed up. This is gonna be a little more kind of advanced talk. We're gonna kind of get into more so building blocks to make applications on top of Lightning themselves. And the other thing as well is if y'all have any questions during the talk, definitely ask the questions in real time, because otherwise it is kind of dense as I was writing the slides, but hopefully we can get through it. So this is kind of a brief outline. So initially I'll kind of talk about Lightning itself. It's kind of a new simplified L2 API for actually Bitcoin itself to interact with it. Then I'll kind of get into some use cases as far as the different ways you can actually have offline payments, something we call TLV Onion. So if you maybe when Renee talked know a little bit about onion routing, exactly how this is in Lightning, and then we'll get some extension of that, allowing you to have some arbitrary payment messaging in terms of the payments themselves, task splitting, recurring payments is something we call HODL HTLCs. So we'll get into it first. So I feel one of the biggest things about Lightning is really just represents a more simplified API to actually interact with Bitcoin itself. Because if you ever done raw Bitcoin development, basically you have to deal with issues of zero conf. Is it confirmed? Is it going to be validated? How am I going to track the inputs or not? Malleability itself, that has a bunch of issues as far as how you're tracking the payments into your thing. Which one's doing RBF? Which ones you're actually reporting back to your user? And also confirmation times themselves. And Lightning gets past all of this. And I think the main focus for Lightning is to gives you simplified interface. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Slow down even 10%.
All right. All right, give that a shot. So the main purpose is basically to give developers a simplified interface to actually interact with Bitcoin themselves, right? And using this, I feel this is one of the big deals because initially many people were on maybe other platforms or rails. They felt couldn't really build applications on top of Bitcoin because it was just so complicated how to discover rails. But with Lightning, you can really just focus on the application themselves and have a more simplified interface. And obviously the managers are lower fees because on Lightning you have a market-based fee mechanism that's a little bit slightly different from Bitcoin's raw mechanism. You also have low latency payments because it's more instant. There's you're not really waiting for any block confirmation times, and also it's more streamlined UX. I feel the UX is probably one of the biggest things because whenever you actually see something Lightning demo, it just works, right? You basically scan your QR code, boom, and it's there. You have a check mark. It's not okay, waiting for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, is it really confirmed or not? And then I have something I kind of call a simplified L2 API for Bitcoin. So it's this is you can view as exactly more simplified API for actually interacting with Lightning itself. So first you basically have opening a channel. Opening a channel takes a peer's public key and returns something I call a channel point. And channel point is basically your identifier for actually interacting with or identifying a particular channel ahead of time. Then obviously you can close a channel. And there's something called force closing, which maybe you covered in Renee's talk. Basically the difference is when you do a cooperative close, that's force equals false. You can just really get the coins on chain, next confirmation. While force closing may need to wait a period of time because maybe there's some contestation period going on in the thing itself. Then obviously you have requests. It's you're requesting a payment. You basically have an amount and certain conditions. We'll talk about the conditions a little bit later. That gives you an invoice. The invoice is basically the equivalent on Lightning to a Bitcoin address, right? But it's cool because the invoice has more detail. It has more information. The invoice can have a memo. It can have a tag. And have a description, whatever else. So you can have a lot more metadata in the invoice themselves. One thing we'll get into later as well. The invoice also acts as a signed receipt for your transaction of Bitcoin, right? Because the invoice is actually signed by the person who's creating the invoice themselves. Once you have the prepayment, you can basically have those two together and prove to an individual that you paid a payment on Lightning itself. And then finally, you have a pay. And pay. Oh wait, that's a mistake in the slides. Request there that should be pay. I guess I messed up. Pay takes another invoice, and that gives you a pre-image itself, right? And like we talked about earlier, the pre-image is the proof of your payment. So once you have the invoice and the pre-image together, you basically prove to someone that you've actually paid something on Lightning. And one of the things I work on this implementation called LND, and LND has this API. It's a superset of what I have right now. You use something called gRPC, and gRPC is basically where you can interact with LND using a language agnostic RPC interface itself, right? And the supports a bunch of different languages like Python, Java, C++, whatever else. This is really cool because all of a sudden now you can actually interact with Lightning more in the core of your application. So it's more embedded in your business logic, right? So rather than maybe calling some HTTP request or whatever else, you have a raw object that you can interact with to do send payments or whatever else. The other cool thing about gRPC, it actually supports streaming requests and responses. So this means you can do responses or even notifications, which is pretty cool. So you can listen for on some streaming endpoint when every single time a payment is actually paid. It's going to give you a notification, which is cool. You can then more easily hook that up to a UI and have that cool check mark which is shown at the end. Great. Any questions at this point? No? All right, we'll move on. So like here's an example of kind of like what the API docs for LND look like. So this is like, as I was saying, like, open channel like I had here is like very simple, only took a pure public key, but obviously there's a lot more kind of parameters on there. The other cool thing about this, like if you look on the right, you actually have examples for like Python, and then even JavaScript and Shell, whatever else. If you go to like our repo on LND, we even have like other kind of like languages as well that have tutorials on that too. And but yeah, so I think this is pretty cool because all of a sudden you basically just see that they create kind of like a connection, they open a channel, and then from there on, they can use that same channel object to interact with it or kind of like do other things from there on. Cool. All right, TLV Onion Payloads. So maybe y'all covered this a little bit earlier, maybe one of Renee's talks. Basically, like Lightning uses onion routing to actually allow individuals to route payments via the network itself, right? So one of the things as well, like so we use something called Sphinx, which he covered. And one of the things we actually started to advance Sphinx a little bit more to kind of add additional details to Sphinx to make it a little bit easier to use and maybe a little bit more specific to like our particular use case. So one thing that we call is basically like this TLV onion payload thing, right? So TLV stands for like type length value, and it's basically a way to make the onion packets more flexible, right? So basically right now, like the payloads just have the strict information only required for payment forwarding, right? And this is basically the channel ID. That's kind of like, okay, I get an HTLC in, where am I going to send it out to? The amount, that's also kind of like predicated on like the particular fees I'm accepting, and then also the log time, that also depends kind of like how the route's actually crafted. And right now, the information is only there, the information there is only critical for payment forwarding and nothing else, right? The TLV, it's basically where we can actually expand, the other thing as well, lets you kind of like verify if the incoming HLC has been like well formed, because otherwise you may actually like give away money or something like that, or maybe even send the HLC on the long route itself. So one thing we realized that we were looking to like have kind of like a more like modern, flexible format for the packets themselves. The cool thing about that too is that this current format, we were kind of like locked into it. We couldn't really modify it that easily because it was kind of more like a fixed field of kind of like attributes or some data. While the TLV format, because it's more kind of like a time-to-length value thing, it's a lot more flexible and allows us to actually modify the thing in the future as well. So the difference is, like you're saying, TLV stands for type length value, right? So like, for example, like in the old payload, like channel ID, amount, and log time, that was all kind of like serialized in series, right? So you had the amount, then the log time, then the channel ID itself. But the TLV format is kind of like, think of it as kind of like a serialized map or a dictionary, right? So rather than like me saying, okay, like bytes 5 to like 22 or this particular field, I can instead kind of like access the payload as a map. So I can basically look in the amount inside the map and get 100 out of it. This is really cool because all of a sudden now you can think of it as just kind of like an arbitrary like dictionary or like, key value pairs that you can actually send to any individual on the network. And the cool thing about this, you can add information in addition to what's just critical for routing itself. So I can add, for example, I can add like a memo, an account ID, or other things as well. And one of the cool things about it is that there's kind of like a reserved type range. So like we were saying, certain attributes are actually critical for routing, certain ones aren't themselves, right? So one thing we're thinking of doing is kind of like reserving the type range into like critical and like non-critical types, right? So critical types are that actually required for routing. Non-critical means that you can use it for any other arbitrary application data, and that like helps you out like a good bit. And yeah, so the application usage, and like we have like 64 bits, so we have like a lot of types. Like we have like over like 8 billion, or we're not going to run out of types at this point, so I don't think we're really worried about that. The other cool thing about this upgrade in Lightning is actually like an end-to-end upgrade, right? Meaning that like only the endpoints actually need to upgrade in order to take advantage of this use case, which is really cool because like as you know, in kind of like a decentralized system, it can be hard to actually upgrade all the nodes at the same time, right? There's no like flag flip. You can't just like pushing up the app to every single node. So instead, you can just have like the endpoints Alice and Bob upgrade, and once they upgrade, you can actually use this feature instantly. So basically, right now, like we have some like PRs across the other implementations. People can actually use it on the network live today, which is really cool and kind of like shows how Lightning is a little more flexible as far as making real life features compared to maybe Bitcoin, where you have like a soft fork or a hard fork in order to actually use these new features. And this is pretty cool because you can actually have a number of different use cases. So like one thing that people ask me a lot of time, like as far as like when they're actually developing Lightning, they're asking kind of like, can they attach additional data to the payment itself, right? So initially the answer was no. Now the answer is effectively yes. Basically what you can do is imagine like maybe you're doing a payment from a game or something like that. You can actually add maybe details of the game, or maybe like whatever item you're buying or whatever class you are inside the payload to the receiver. Now the receiver actually gets that information once it actually receives the payment. And so you can imagine, let's say I'm depositing to an exchange. Maybe like I want to have like my account ID in that payload, and so I can actually put my account ID in the payload. Once it gets to them, they actually have that account ID, and at that point they can credit my account on the exchange or whatever else. So at this point, you can basically, yeah, question.
What's the size of the dictionary you use now, and do I have to conform to some standard for the dictionary?
That's a good question. The question was like, what's the size of the dictionary now, kind of like this TLP payload, and does it have to conform to any sort of like format there? So the size now, so like maximally it's up to like 1,300 bytes, right? And the more space you use in the dictionary, kind of like the shorter the route can actually be, because like it's a fixed packet of 1,300 bytes, 1.3 kilobytes. So therefore, if I use like 1 kilobyte on it, I only have like 300 bytes left, which may actually reduce the number of hops I could have in my route. So typically, I think right now the diameter of the network is maybe like 5 or like 6, nodes. So typically you can probably use a good bit of it, but I think we kind of recommend people to kind of like at least store like minimal information there as possible, just in order because you can allow it to kind of like have a greater extent of like the paths that it can actually uphold. So I think right now, like most of these cases I have in mind are maybe like less than a few hundred bytes or so. And the other cool thing is that like if you need to send more data, you can actually just like have like multiple payments. So I can like have like 3 payments that I use to send you some data rather than like just having it in one. We'll talk about that a little bit later as far as like what multipath payments mean as well. Yeah. And so there's some other use cases. I mean, some people. Andreas. Yes, that's definitely a good point. So TLV stands for type length value. So basically, this is the way these things are serialized on the byte. So for initially, you have like a type, which kind of like lets you know, okay, this is the amount. Then you have like a length, which is the length of the serialized value, and then that's kind of like this like 3 tuple of things you can actually do. This is really cool because it actually allows for kind of like forwards and backwards compatibility, right? So like let's say I give you like a payload that has types you don't really know about. That's okay because you're only going to be checking the dictionary for types you know about, right? So you kind of have like both forwards and backwards compatibility. So it's a very, very flexible way to upgrade the network, and like it's like something. It took a little bit while to kind of like get the format, the price format that we have right now, but I think it's a pretty big deal and it's rolling out right now. And it's like, so like many of the applications we talk about in this talk are actually based on this new TLV format itself. It's kind of like what you can do with it and some of the power that it unlocks. Cool. All right, let's go on. All right, so here's the thing. So I guess one question is like, one thing I hear a lot, people say, okay, Lightning can't handle offline payments, right? But that's like not really true. I mean, it also depends on kind of what you mean by offline payments precisely. So I'll kind of talk about what you can actually do that on Lightning today. True or false? I guess maybe the title gives it away, but you can do it for some kind of definition of offline payments. So let's talk about kind of like how like payment verification is actually done in the first place in Lightning itself. So first you have kind of like invoice generation. And invoice generation requires you basically generate like a random number. Let's call that the preimage. And now that's kind of like the secret value the receiver has, which is going to be revealed to the sender along the route to actually settle the payment. And then the the receiver actually then does SHA-256, basically hashes the preimage has the payment hash, right? And the payment hash is now kind of like your primary identifier that people will be using to actually send payments to you on the network. Then we have payment verification. So this is the other side. So like let's say I receive a new HTLC and like now I want to actually be able to like settle the payment itself, right? Or I just make sure that actually matches. I then take the preimage that I have, which is me, the receiver. I then hash that, and then I check that the payment hash matches the SHA-256 of the preimage. Now at this point, I know that like payment is valid and actually settled and move forward. One other thing that's I think pretty useful, kind of like a mental model, is actually treating the invoice and the preimage as kind of like a signed receipt. So one question is like, let's say like we have like something that's offline, and I basically present the payment hash. The question is like, how does the offline agent, maybe there's like a vending machine, something else, how does it actually know the payment hash is legitimate? And the way it is, the invoice is actually signed by the public key of the receiving node themselves, right? So therefore, assuming the agent actually knows what the public key of the receiving node is, once it has the invoice, it can actually verify the signature and understand, okay, this came from my node that actually have it online somewhere else. And this is like also a pretty powerful feature. The other cool thing about this is like once you have the preimage and the invoice, which is actually signed, you now have kind of like a proof of payment. So once I can present that maybe to like customer support or someone else, they can verify that okay, I actually made that payment successfully. And the other cool thing, you can actually delegate this signing key to a distinct public key, right? So typically, the signing key for the invoice is the key of the node itself, which is typically online. So like if you actually wanted to generate invoices yourself, you basically need to like contact that node every single time in order to get all these invoices. What you can do instead, you can actually have the routing node itself or the receiving node actually delegate a new public key for signing the invoices to this new offline agent themselves, right? So at this point, you kind of think of it almost like as a certificate at this point, right? So basically, the offline node delegates the ability to create invoices for that node to someone that's actually offline. So now at this point, we're able to generate invoices that are fully valid and that will be verified by any other Lightning client, and that's kind of like the first building block and actually enabling offline payments. And so one other question is like, how does like the agent actually obtain the payment hash, right? So typically what we're doing, like typically in the invoice generation step, everyone's like generating these payment hashes randomly every single time, online. So the question is like, how can we actually have something that's offline that is able to generate payment hash without actually connecting to this other mechanism or this other like node that's online itself? The answer is basically it doesn't need to, right? So there's a way where, so like the key insight here is that like, if we can do like a one-time setup with maybe like my vending machine and my online Lightning node, we can then at that point actually synchronize each other's payment hashes to allow them to actually generate payment hashes and preimages themselves to ensure that they can both settle the preimages and actually generate proper payment hashes in step. So now we're going to get just a little bit lower level. Or any questions on this section at all first before we move on? All right, cool. The entire thing. I think Andreas has a question.
So, are you going to be talking about how they synchronize? Is that some kind of deterministic random?
Exactly, yeah. So it's kind of like a deterministic random generator, like a PRF, and we'll talk about this over here. So we're going to talk about something called the Elkim tree, and Elkim is basically Merkle spelled backwards. It was basically made by Tad Dreijer in like 2014, 2015, kind of like a way to have a compact state for replication. So like, today in protocol we use something called SHA chain, which is a little bit more complex, but I like Alchemy because I think Alchemy is a little bit easier to kind of like explain to an audience beyond kind of SHA chain. Because SHA chain is kind of like hyperdimensional, while Alchemy is kind of like very like linear. It's basically just a tree, right? So this is the question. So this is a response to basically how do we ensure that you can actually synchronize payment hashes, right? So we'd like ideally where like if the offline vending machine makes a payment hash, then the online node is able to actually get the preimage for that payment hash itself, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to pull the payments. And so we're going to do something called like an outcome tree in order to allow these individuals to deterministically generate these payment hashes amongst themselves to ensure that it's able to settle any payment that comes through. All right, so first we have a setup. Setup is basically just first generating a 256-bit random number, and that's kind of like our seed. Then we hash that once, and that's kind of like the root of the tree. And like the thing is, Alchemy itself is kind of like a hash tree. Typically Merkle trees are kind of like created from like the ground up, right? You basically have all your leaves, you hash them up, and everything like that. Alchemy is backwards. It actually goes from the root and derives all the elements, down to the leaves themselves. This is really cool because it has the trait as well, where because we're using hash functions, they're actually one way. If you have an internal node, you can actually derive anything below you, which kind of like lets you compact the state. So if you have the root seed, you can derive everything else, but then like maybe a receiver only has some certain internal nodes, and they can use that to derive everything else. And so basically the question is now is like how do we actually traverse this tree, left and right? So if we start with our kind of like our root tree or maybe our internal node, if we hash the internal node in 1, that's us going left, and if we hash the internal node in right, that's us going right, basically, right? So at this point, you kind of like view it as okay, well, if I know the kind of like binary representation of like some value, then I can use that to actually derive every single thing in the tree themselves, right? So like, let's say the tree was of depth 9, that means we can have like 1,000 different hashes. If it's of depth 2, we could have like 4 billion different hashes, right? So let's say I was going to derive the second child in my tree of depth 10 itself, right? I would basically kind of like use this binary representation right here, and I'd go 0, like left times 9, basically 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then finally go to right 1, and then I have that particular element there. So this is really cool because now so this is how we're kind of like synchronizing state, right? So if you assume that like the vending machine kind of has like a counter, and also the online node has a counter themselves, if the vending machine says, hey, this is the 5th payment hash, then at that point the online machine basically traverses this different tree and then derive that payment hash, and then we'll use that to settle the payment online or offline to the vending machine itself. And this is basically kind of like the one little trick we're using to allow the individual to actually synchronize the payment hashes together. Andreas, question?
This seems very similar to hierarchical deterministic wallets. In terms of the tree structure, the hashes going down, parents showing the relationship.
Yep.
How is it different? What is the advantage of this versus that?
That's a very good question. So I guess like that one is kind of like you can say like multi-dimensional because you can actually have like every single child, and then from that child you can have you can say it kind of like has like a wider branching factor. And so I guess the question was all, like I was basically like how is this different from kind of like BIP32 or kind of like HD keys in Bitcoin, right? So because with that you can actually once you have like any like different public key in that scheme, you can actually then kind of like have like a much wider tree because you can basically just like iterate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then go down at that point. Then all of this can generate their own keys. Yeah, so this is a binary tree. Yeah, and the simplification here as well, like that generates public keys, while this is only concerned generating hashes themselves. So it's a lot simpler to actually code out, and this is basically the specification very easily in this thing right here. So it's kind of like an example. This is what it will look like essentially, right? So let's say we have like our root node, that's like 2, 3, D9, whatever else. And we have like our 2 other branches, left and right. So I hash 1, I go left, and I hash right, and I go 0, and then like I go one other further step down to the other step there too. One other thing to realize, like let's say I have an internal node, I have 99AE83. Once I have that itself, I can throw away all the other state. So let's say initially I get the 2 left childs of it, and I'm holding those 2. And let's say eventually they give me that upper one. I can actually just throw away those 2 left childs. Once I have the root, I can go down to any of those other versions themselves. So it's kind of a really cool way to basically allow you have this compact state to generate any other payment hash that you need to in our scheme. Cool. All right, so now let's put everything together basically. So first we have like kind of our offline setup in this offline agent. So initially it's going to have like this delegation certificate from the node itself. It's going to basically be initialized with an algorithm seed. This is an important step. It's going to set this invoice counter to basically to 0. This is kind of like its running state of the number of invoices it's actually generated over its lifetime. And then for the online node, we have something similar. It also has its own inverse counter because it needs to actually mirror the inverse counters themselves. So basically, the assumption here is like throughout the entire lifetime, both of them will actually have the exact same counter. So it's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to keep incrementing from there on. gets the certificate, and then also it has its own outcome seed. So now question like, how do we actually do the payment generation itself? So basically, we have this function, it's like an abstract function called like new invoice. It's going to take the outcome seed itself, the invoice counter, the invoice certificate, and make a new invoice, right? So like, it's basically going to like use the outcome seed to actually generate the nth leave or the invoice counterth leave inside this outcome tree, and then use the cert to ensure that's actually a valid invoice. Then it's going to actually present the invoice to the payer, who's like, getting like a candy or something like that. This is cool because this can be over like, QR codes, Bluetooth MC, or whatever else. And then it's going to increment the invoice counter, right? So it always has to do that in order to actually maintain synchronization with the other party itself. Now we have the online payment verification. So one other thing which I kind of like gloss over here slightly is remember like earlier we talked about you can actually have like this arbitrary key value pairs in the onion payload itself. So what's going to happen like the payer is actually going to like from the invoice apply the invoice counter into the actual payment they're sending to the other side, right? So therefore from the other side, once the receiver has the onion payload, it's going to actually parse the onion payload, get that out of it, and then actually the kind of like dictionary that we talked about, that kind of like TLV structure, and then get the counter from that. And then once it has the counter, it's then going to use that counter to derive the actual preimage for that payment, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's the payment. Right, so doing this, like this entire time, this thing was offline, and we have something else online. And it's pretty cool because there are a number of other kind of use cases. Imagine there's like a vending machine, typical thing, like everyone wants to do itself. You can basically just like have that thing display like maybe the invoice details and like a QR code, scan, and then pay it, and everything's fine. The one critical thing here too is that typically the vending machine, you basically put in your coins, and you get you put in the the digit of like the entry in the vending machine. You get your goods back immediately. In this case, you actually have to present the proof of your payment to the vending machine itself, right? So initially, the step would be okay. I go there, I scan the QR code, I have whatever else, and either like similar like via like NFC or like or QR code, I then show the vending machine the proof of payment of the thing itself. Another cool use case, let's say people have these like scooter thingies, and they're like some other cities. You imagine basically this thing has maybe like an e-ink QR code display, and I can basically sign it. I can send it over there and then prove the payment. The cool thing about that point, like this can remain fully offline, which means it's actually cheaper to manufacture these scooter cycles now because typically right now maybe they're connected to some like 3G or whatever else. They actually have to communicate with some server somewhere. But this allows it to be completely offline. So basically how you do offline payments on Lightning, which is a pretty cool use case. Any questions on this stuff? Yeah.
So you talk about this outcome tree and you're traversing down it based on the counter. At the bottom of that, is that producing the pre-image that you then hash produce this?
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of like a step that I left off. We can go back here. Can I go back a lot? Okay, here. Yeah, so that thing like D to whatever else, that's actually the previous. We'll hash that one more time in order to get payment hash itself. That's a very good question. But the question was also like, like is that leaf actually the preimage of the payment hash? The answer is actually the preimage. So we'll hash that one more time actually to get the payment hash we'll use for the payment itself. Cool. All right. Any other questions? All right. Everyone. Oh, Alex.
Yeah, when the offline node signs the invoice, would it also put the amount of the invoice and with the online node to verify that the information associated is
Greater than the amount? Yes. So basically, yes. So it would need to add the amount just so it knows that like, well, I guess there's two different ways you can do it, right? One way is you can actually have the amount be explicit, or you can maybe add additional metadata that says, hey, I'm paying for this candy bar, then it basically knows, okay, that candy bar is that particular price. And the thing there too is that like, what it can do, it can actually, have the amount be in the onion itself, and they can actually cross-verify that too. And the question, repeating again, the question was like, how does the offline node actually verify the amounts? And the answer is that it can actually just check the inventory where I have that be, given to it explicitly in the onion payload itself. Yeah. All right, cool. All right, move on then. All right, now we're going to talk about a slightly different use case, kind of like talking about tap splitting and kind of like multi-path payments, which I alluded to a little bit earlier. So basically today, Lightning payments, you can actually receive your max as far as like sending and receiving in your channel. So like for example, like let's say I have like 5 channels, like let's say I have 2 channels with 5 BTC each, and like that's like total 10 BTC in both my channels. I can actually only send 5 BTC maximally, right? That's kind of like pretty limiting. So basically this means that you can only actually send or receive the maximum of your total channel capacity at any given time. And that's kind of this is like pretty limiting. So we obviously decided to fix this in the protocol. And the other thing about this actually doesn't like fully utilize the bandwidth of the network, right? So basically, at this point, you can only ever actually utilize one channel at any given time when you're sending payments. So let's say you imagine you have like 10,000 channels, and all of them maybe are equally probably actually support your payment. You can actually use one of that. That means with the utilization, the network is like a lot lower than it actually should be in reality. It's kind of similar to, so the solution for this is kind of like, we're actually going to be breaking up these payments into like smaller chunks, right? This is similar to kind of like IP fragmentation. You guys know about this. Basically, on the IP protocol on the internet, anytime you're sending a packet that's maybe like too large, you actually kind of like, chop it down to extra smaller packets, right? This is a similar thing. So now it's kind of like a payments as a packets type of metaphor, where we're actually going to be sending, so if I wanted to send like 10 BTC, I would send 2 5 BTC payments, and the other side would basically assemble them together at the end, and then pull them all at once, basically. So this is really cool because all of a sudden now, like, I can utilize a lot more diverse paths of the network themselves, basically, right? I can even now maybe even like dynamically, kind of like chop up on packets to ensure it gets to the other side properly. And something we call is called MPP right now. It's a bunch of different names, but this is the one I prefer. It's called MPP, or basically multi-path payments. It allows you to kind of like split these payment shards over multiple shards. One other important thing as well here, like typically, on the internet, whenever you go down to kind of like a lower level, you can have something called like an MTU, kind of like maximum transmission unit, right? So basically, it defines exactly like what's the largest packet you can send on that link layer level. But so something online, we have an equivalent value we call it kind of like a max HTLC. So this is very important because every single node basically signals the maximum HTLC they're willing to actually accept themselves. This lets the sender then actually chop up their payments to ensure that they can actually traverse all these paths properly to make sure everything actually gets to the other end. So it's kind of like a cool thing. We're kind of like inspired a little bit by the IP protocol and like putting some of that knowledge exactly into Lightning itself. And the sender can you're saying use these HTLCs or max HTLC values for kind of like a guide for the payment splitting. So the question now is like, okay, how do we actually receive this multi-path payment as the receiver? So what the receiver does is basically generates a new invoice, and that invoice actually signals, okay, hey, I can actually accept these multi-path payments, and maybe the sender at that point is able to acknowledge that the receiver can actually get those payments themselves. It kind of like has, two variables, has like HTLC sum, and the let's say it's just like 10 BTC. So what it's going to do is just going to keep waiting for these HTLCs to come in until they have the total value of effective, right? So it's kind of like a slightly weaker version, which I'll talk about a little bit, has like a slightly stronger one instead. But at that point, it's going to continue to increment, the HTLC sum here by the amount of the HTLC that's being extended, and once everything is full, it basically settles everything with a preimage, right? So all it's doing is like, it's making this new invoice and then waiting for all the HTLCs to come in, because it's not going to wait, it's not going to pull it because it wants the full value of whatever good service it's selling, and then it's going to pull those all at once. And then the receiver side, and the other thing too is that like, we have something called like a donation invoice in Lightning itself, which basically allows you to make an invoice that doesn't really specify the value ahead of time. So instead, what we do in order to signal the total amount of payment to the receiver, it's actually going to put that total amount in the TLV Onion Payload itself too, right? Now at this point, like it can say, okay, I have the first payment stride. You're sending me 10 BTC. I've received 5 BTC for, therefore I'm going to wait. Second payment stride, okay, that's like 10 BTC. Now I sell them all at once. And now we talk about kind of like sender actions. Basically, the sender's going to do some sort of like payment splitting, right? So this is one thing I'm leaving open. It's kind of like a very big research topic. Exactly like how should you split your payments? Should you basically do it dynamically? Should you do it only as needed? But it's going to like somehow use the max HTLC value to actually do its payment splitting to get to the other side. And I was saying like it's basically kind of like two different classes of like thought exactly how you're going to split your payments. The first one is kind of like an optimistic split, which basically means you're going to split exactly when it's necessary. And like, if you look at our first use case, we split optimistically at that point because we know that our channels are insufficient to actually support that payment. The other one is kind of like a reactive based splitting, right? We just, okay, I'm going to try 10 BTC all at once. Only once that fails, maybe then I'll split it up again at that point. Maybe you can have something simpler. Maybe let's say you just kind of like divide it by 2 every single time, and basically now at this point you're dividing and conquering to make sure all the payments are getting to the other side. Any questions on this? Yep. Okay, right over there too. Mm-hmm. So the question is like whenever you're splitting payments, is that going to result in like a higher CLTV value because you now have more paths? The answer is like not necessarily, because you can say they can also have like maybe a CLTV value of like 40 or 50 because like and one other thing is like maybe you can say that like the receiver is actually going to have like maybe a timer. If all the payments are going to get in a particular period of time, it's going to cancel everything back to it itself. So it doesn't really affect it. You can say maybe like will it result in like a longer payment path, and a longer payment path may actually result in a longer CLTV value, but they're not completely correlated. And I think Andres had a question. And yeah, let's see. Very good question. So his question was basically like, we have basically multiple payment paths. Like, does each individual payment have the same payment hash? The question for this one MPP is yes. So basically, it has the same payment hash to allow the individual to, have that signed receipt still. There's another version I'm going to talk about, like after someone actually has a different payment hash for every single one of those paths. The question you're saying, like, how does it actually change the game theory? It does, because now the receiver needs to be very, very careful to only reveal the preimage only once every single thing gets there, right? Because otherwise, let's say the first one got there and revealed the preimage, and then someone else says, oh, well, I'm going to check that myself because I already know the preimage. So therefore, we basically need to be a little more careful about like ensuring that the other individual is able to settle everything all at once. It's definitely a trade-off. The other one that I'm going to talk about in a little bit has the trade-off that where basically everything is now randomized, every single randomized payment hash, but you don't currently in this new version have that kind of like signed payment receipt. And so there's definitely trade-offs there. And I think, did you have one as well? Yes. The question is like, is it guaranteed to be atomic because the receiver wants all the funds? And the question is like, kind of mostly. So once again, there's kind of like some kind of like incentive there that like the receiver wants to wait until all the money gets there before they pull it. Now I'll talk about another one that kind of is actually more like cryptographically atomic a little bit later. This one's kind of like, okay, well, we trust they're going to wait for everything to get there in order for everything to happen. I think Renee, you had a question? Or yeah.
Because I mean, basically, if one path fails, the entire payment fails. So would this like delay payments in general?
Yeah, so his question is like, is it actually going to make the payment time longer if one path fails, everything else fails? It may. Like it's two different approaches. Like one approach, if you're doing the optimistic splitting, you actually do all the payments all at once, possibly, right? And maybe like one of them right there. The other thing too is that like if if one of the payment does fail, like in this version, you would likely want to request another invoice, possibly. Well, if we'll talk about an AMP, the AMP can actually like kind of like heal the stuff in like what we call kind of like a dynamic mechanism. So you can actually just like resplit all the payments at once, even if one of them fails. So like you're saying, it can be fragile. Like we're saying, if one of them does fail, then maybe it's not that good. The other downside with this is that because all the payment hashes share the same payment hash, you can kind of like correlate exactly these three payments are to that same payment hash itself, which means maybe someone can actually nefariously try to like stop one of the payments to actually make things not go through properly. I think you had a question?
Avoid having the node on different paths. I mean, that can actually cause your second to the last, and the little paths. If you get the preimage cheap.
Exactly. So his question basically similar to Andreas. Like, do you want to avoid nodes in different paths? Basically, do you want to ensure they all have distinct paths? You could possibly. I mean, so one other thing as well is like, because each payment actually consumes some bandwidth in every single channel, you may want to have all the paths be completely independent, basically, and actually take a very diverse array of paths to the network themselves. But like, that's probably the biggest thing here, where like the receiver should wait until everything actually arrives before they can pull things forward. We'll talk about it later. There's another version that actually ensures the receiver cannot pull until everything is actually there beforehand. I think I have a question in the back. Kind of. So you can say like, so this question is like, is there a question of like uptime for route discovery? So there is, in a sense, you can say that maybe like an individual node should actually only connect to nodes that actually have good uptime themselves, right? So therefore, if you have a channel peer and their uptime is not very good, maybe they're not very profitable, you may want to actually close that channel and allocate the money elsewhere. So like, nodes should take uptime into account when they're actually establishing their own, their own channels. You can even say maybe like there's some other kind of like third-party service that tells like a client the uptime of these other nodes, so we can only route through what we think are like good nodes, possibly. Yeah, cool. I guess we'll talk about some use cases now. And so this is pretty cool because like one cool thing about MPPs kind of like allows you to like have invoice be generated and actually be paid by several distinct payers themselves, right? Which is a pretty cool thing compared to right now with Lightning. Only one person can actually pay any given invoice. One example here is kind of like a crowdsourced donation thing. Let's say like some agent basically publishes their kind of like MPP invoice publicly, and they say, okay, I want to crowdsource donations to like make some like concert for my birthday party or something else, kind of like the whole GoFundMe thing. And now at this point, basically the crowd can then like take that invoice amount and then incrementally pay out portions of it to that receiver, and basically this allows, like, let's say maybe like 10 different individuals, they're all paying this invoice to basically doing this thing. The other thing as well is like, for this use case, you would ideally want to have kind of like the pending amount be published somewhere publicly, so basically people can like properly craft their payment sizes accordingly. And another cool case, kind of like tap splitting. Let's say like three of us out to lunch, and like let's say like we're paying over Lightning, and there's an invoice. What we can do instead now, like all three of our persons actually pay the tab, concurrently. Okay, I say, okay, I pay $5, you pay $5, you pay $3 because you only got a coffee or whatever else. You can actually pay that all at once. It's pretty cool because it's kind of like a coin join on Lightning itself. So you can actually say, okay, well, the three of us paid a single payment, and it was all off chain, and we actually fully started everything was fine. In this case, you can also have the wallets maybe scan the QR code of the invoice, off chain or use Bluetooth or whatever else. So like main advantage from this one over like what I was talking about, it's like main disadvantage, like everyone else kind of knows, that like because the payment has to reuse, there is a danger if someone actually settles early. But the advantage from this one is you can actually still have the whole signed invoice thing effectively, right? So once you make the payment, you can actually have a proof that, okay, I have the privilege and the signed invoice together, which maybe some people think is valuable for those use cases. What else? Spontaneous payments. I guess now we'll get into this other one. So let's talk about AMP. So this is like a slightly different version of kind of like doing this like multi-path payment, but we call it AMP because it's actually like fully atomic. It's atomic meaning that the receiver cannot actually pull the payments until every single piece is got there, right? And the one of the things, this actually kind of like flips Lightning on its head, because typically with Lightning, the receiver is the one that's actually going to be generating the preimage, right? And so basically you generate the preimage, get the invoice, give it to the sender. In this case, actually, the sender itself is actually going to generate the preimage themselves. And the cool thing about this, because like everything is end-to-end encrypted in the onion layer of Lightning itself, what happens, like the sender can actually encrypt the preimage in the payload and send it to the receiver. So let's say I was going to do a payment. The other cool thing about this is actually lets like a different class of like push payments, right? So typically for Lightning right now, you basically have to like request an invoice from another individual. When you go to them, basically get the invoice and then bring it back to your wallet or else. In this case, I can actually just push payment to you directly, knowing only your public key. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to take the preimage, encrypt it in the payload, and then send it all the way to you. And like similar to what we talked about, we have this kind of like payload, which is a dictionary. You're going to decrypt at the other end, and then you can access the preimage and then sell it instantly. So this is cool because now I can pay you on demand anytime I want to, which lends to a number of kind of really cool use cases. So like one thing is, so we're going to get like low level for a second here. I won't dwell on that too much because it's could be a little bit advanced depending on like how much of the stuff you've studied. We basically use something called like additive secret sharing to actually make this happen. So what it's going to do, it's actually going to take the original preimage and then like secret share the preimage using additive secret sharing, and then send you like one shard with every single sub payment, and then the final at the end, you can then take all the sub shards and like make it into the base preimage, and then do all the settling from there on. So we'll talk about that public key. Yeah, this has like a number of benefits. One benefit is that you can actually do like streaming payments a lot more easily. So basically now I don't need to request a new invoice every single time. I can just like push you the payment as soon as I know that I need to actually have the next value. You can also kind of like do any type of like media services, maybe like this like audio video streaming, or maybe like you're running your screen and you're paying it by a minute, as you're writing on it itself. And then finally, we'll talk about kind of like payment constructions. So like I was saying earlier, you're going to use the TLV payload to actually pass the payment charge to the receiver. This is like a very like base, simple case. Let's say I want to make a payment. I want to basically have, two different payments, paying like 5 BTC each itself, right? So what I do, I basically have like two random values, R1 and R2, and then I XOR those together, and then now that's actually my base image itself, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to send R1 and R2 to the other side, and they can complete that same operation, XOR those two values together, and then arrive at the same base image. And one thing, because these are completely random values, by knowing one of the shares, you don't actually give away any information about the base preimage itself, right? This is what it looks like. So then once we have the base preimage, we're actually going to like generate these two kind of like child hashes or child preimages. Right? Once again, taking that base preimage and using a similar thing, we have a kind of like tree structure. Concat1 have some random value, concat2 have another random value. And that's basically what the sender does. And the receiver will then take that and reconstruct it by itself. So basically, it's going to have shard 1. Let's say I have first onion payload 1, comes to me in HTLC. I have that. Then I have another onion payload 2. That's my second shard. And at that point, I'm going to XOR the two together and then have like this new shared base preimage. So it's pretty cool because you can imagine, like in this case, you can actually have any number of payment shards, right? Because you can basically just keep on generating these random values to ensure they actually XOR the base preimage. One other thing people talked about earlier is like this now solves the issue that maybe MPP had, right? The issue MPP had was that like you were actually using the same base preimage, the same payment hash along all the other routes. Well, this one they're all going to be completely randomized. So you can even say this adds additional privacy because at this point, like everything actually looks like it's actually completely uncorrelated. And also it's cool because now, so one other thing which you need to notice, which is kind of important here, is like the receiver cannot pull until it has all of the payment shards, right? Because once it has shard 1, it would need to completely guess shard 2, which is infeasible. It can't actually do anything at that point. This is now like actually fully atomic on the other end of the receiver. Any questions on this? Alex first. Mm-hmm. Yes, very good question. So like I kind of simplify this a little bit. So like it has, so this question is basically like, let's say you're kind of like, sending the payment shards like 1, 2, 3, whatever else. Because the way this is designed, you can actually pull it into all the shards together. So this question is, can that sender now like pay for like, partially consumed resource rather than the entire amount? The answer is actually yes. What I can do, it can actually just like create another maybe like small payment that will complete the payment shard, the base preimage itself, right? So let's say it does like 1, 2, 3, so like I'm done. It can then actually just like construct, like, I won't get into it. It can actually just like solve for the new shard it needs to send in order to allow it to construct that base preimage itself. So at any given point, you can say, okay, I'm done. I said I was going to send $10. I'm actually only going to send $5 and then do it like that itself. I think, did you have one? So we're working on this actively. So this is like one of the bigger things I think is going to be rolled out before the end of the year in Lightning, which I think is going to be like pretty amazing in terms of like all the features that it actually allows to it itself. It's like, it may be in the next L&D release, maybe not, we're working on it, but if not, the next one and so on. Yeah, you had a question? Yes.
Receiving it as it propagates back.
Yes.
The story you're telling here,
yeah.
the sender knows the preimage. So
yeah.
Can you unpack that for me a little bit?
Okay, yes, he was saying that this kind of like reverse sliding on his head because like typically the sender does not know the preimage and actually obtains it. So this one flips on and how does it kind of like work? So actually it's fine really, right? Because the thing is here is like like you can say it assumes kind of like non-inclusion or like the sender isn't actually any of the intermediate nodes themselves because they actually know the preimage, but that wouldn't do anything because it's going to be taking its own money, right? And the other thing as well is like the receiver isn't expecting it because of the node preimage, which doesn't really like affect any of the security in the network itself. But like just the main kind of like one trick here is like we can actually encrypt the preimage in the end-to-end payload to the receiver, meaning that none of the other nodes in the intermediate route can actually get the preimage before everything is fully there. Yeah. Cool. All right. Cool. All right, now we're going to get to our final application, which I think is one of the coolest, personally. So one of the things people talk about in Bitcoin for a while is kind of like, how do I actually pay Netflix in Bitcoin, right? Basically, the question is, how do I do subscription payments with Bitcoin itself? So people kind of talk about a bunch of different use cases. Okay, maybe I'm going to like, I'll like do some like sign and lock time. I'll like sign, 5 transactions, each of them expire in 10 days, and they'll broadcast them itself or whatever else. And that's also kind of think of exactly like how we do this in Lightning. It's pretty different because like typically whenever you have like subscription like Netflix or whatever else, it's a credit card marks. They're actually going to be like pulling these, payments at will, effectively, right? And this is the kind of thing where it's kind of like a dark pattern where you sign up for like their 14-day trial and you don't cancel it. They just keep taking your money, basically, and like that's how they make a lot of money. And like they don't want to tell you. Like some of them tell you now, like, hey, we're going to charge your credit card, but usually they just take it itself, right? So Bitcoin itself is kind of like a manual push payment, right? So you basically need to push your payments to Netflix every single time, otherwise your payment won't succeed. So we're going to actually use AMP to actually solve this at the wallet layer, right? So people talk about this itself, like maybe they have like more kind of like complex solutions where they'll end like something or whatever else. But I think, in my opinion, like I think it's a lot easier to basically solve it at the wallet layer by having the wallet basically know exactly what the payment details are and then send the payments out on demand to the other side. So the one question at that point is like, okay, how is the receiver going to actually correlate my payments to my Netflix account, my Netflix subscription? And that's what we're going to solve here basically with this AMP structure. So what we're going to do, we're going to have like a one-time generation of kind of like the initial parameters itself. Let's say it's like the amount, the duration, frequency, whatever else. We're going to like encode that information in the invoice itself. Maybe it's like a special different invoice. So at this point, I know this is my Netflix invoice itself. Then my wallet is going to now scan this payment descriptor or an invoice in like a one-time setting, right? So at that point, my wallet maybe is able to just say, okay, these are my different subscriptions I have going on. Now it's going to actually have kind of like a cron job locally to pay these payments, over time with a particular interval. The other thing is, well, we can actually have different special commands. I can like cancel or whatever else. I can maybe even, do resubscription or maybe like go to a bigger tier from that point itself. So we're going to I have this thing I'm kind of calling like payment descriptors. Maybe we'll have like a better name in the future. But like one other thing that I was talking about with AMP and also with this new TLV format in general, you can basically have arbitrary key value pairs in the payload, right? So we're going to have something that we call payment address. So the payment address is actually going to be in the invoice. Think about this as my account ID or maybe my identifier in the thing itself. So the cool thing about this is like because every single payment we're going to send will have the exact same payment address, right? This means that the receiver can now say, okay, hey, payment address 555, that's Olaoluwa. He's going to be doing another subscription. So at this point now we've actually linked our payments, which once again are fully spontaneous with this one-time step to ensure that they're linked together. Now we actually know that this is the same subscription. And it also has this other field that we call like a stream ID. And this is basically a field that is actually randomized and changed every single time. This lets you differentiate multiple payments to that same payment address in a particular session, right? So now using this, we kind of like have a one-time setup. I like have my phone, I scan the QR code, I then say, okay, accept subscription, and then progressively my wallet's going to be paying out to the individual over time, and the receiver is actually able to properly map my payment to maybe like a credit card or an account or maybe some other service they're offering me themselves. And like I said, Stream ID is going to differentiate them. And like one of the cool thing I think about this is like I feel like this is probably going to be a very big deal for exchanges themselves, right? So maybe I talked to exchange maybe like 2 years ago, and like I kind of described the whole concept of like payment hash. Something you also noticed, like if you ever reuse a payment hash on the network, you can potentially lose money, right? Assuming that everyone else actually remembers that same payment hash in the system. So like let's say it's someone like just deposits into an exchange and they actually like make a payment and they don't click refresh, right? And then they pay again. All of a sudden, they can actually lose that deposit. And typically, whenever people interact with exchange today, they kind of have like a static Bitcoin address, which makes things a lot more natural. They think, oh, that's like my static address that I can use over and over again. This basically makes that kind of like static Bitcoin address the same way it works, on Bitcoin on Lightning itself. So now there's no issue about like ensuring the individual have to like properly generate payment hash to actually reuse the payments themselves. So now at this point, someone can actually just like have, let's say I'm on like whatever exchange, Bitstamp or something like that. I then have like the app in my wallet. I scan it once, and all of a sudden I say, okay, boom, that's like my exchange deposit address, right? And it doesn't change at all. It's a one-time thing. We have one-time setup. The only thing now is like every single time I'm paying to the other individuals, I now generate a new random payment preimage myself, encrypt it in the payload, and then give it to the exchange. And the important thing as well is like the payment address must be in that payload because now that's how they map my payment to my account ID. And this is pretty cool because all of a sudden now I can basically just like instantly send or deposit to any other exchange or whatever else. The other cool thing is that the exchange themselves can actually now like apply additional business logic onto the deposits or withdrawals, right? So now at this point they can say, okay, well your account has been closed, cancel. Or they can say, oh, like you requested a deposit of 5 BTC, that's 4 BTC, cancel. And this is cool because this also works in the other way around too. Where you can basically give your exchange a payment descriptor and kind of like have them be able to send money to yourself and maybe even control other fields in that. So this is kind of like a way I think it's pretty cool to kind of like do either reoccurring or subscription payments in Lightning that is authenticated and then also allows individuals to push these on at any given time. Andreas has a question?
Another application for this is very relevant to many crypto people is Patreon.
Yeah.
The reason we began to Patreon with crypto is because of the push versus pull modality of recurring subscriptions. People will not refer a subscription.
Exactly. Yeah, so his comment for those in here is that like this is also good for like, kind of like Patreon because it kind of like really just like solves the whole push versus pull thing. You can basically like go to someone's like Patreon account and like scan the their payment descriptor and all of a sudden okay boom I'm gonna send them $10 every month or whatever else and your wallet basically do that automatically. And the other cool thing about this also kind of like takes the cognitive load away from the user because the wallet's gonna be doing this automatically themselves. Like that's what we want to do. We want to basically like have all the logic in the wallet to make it a lot simpler, abstract away from some of all these other complexities in the system. Andreas again?
So follow-up question on that.
Yep.
Does the user wallets have to be and prepare these payments in advance and send them to a provider or something like that?
In the current version I have, it kind of has to be online. So you can imagine it only needs to be online for a very like small amount of time itself. Maybe it has like some notification or like a push notification, then you can do it itself. So currently I don't have a way where it can like delegate that yet, but I'll think about it. Maybe we'll have a solution. We'll see. Yeah. No. Oh, I have one more. Oh, wow, I thought that was it. Okay, all right, we're gonna do this one quickly, but maybe not too quickly. So this is something we're calling like a HODL HTLCs, right? So if we're talking about, like the HTLC is like hash time lock contract, and like the TLC is kind of like a time lock contract, and that's what we're gonna kind of like exploit to allow this other kind of like more advanced use case of Lightning. So basically, typically the payment has like a timeout clause, meaning that if the payment isn't complete before the timeout clause, then it can be canceled either off-chain or on-chain, right? If it's canceled off-chain, maybe that's due to kind of like having invalid payment details or cannot be settled, which means it's gonna be canceled instantly. While if it's canceled on-chain, it's only basically broadcast and go on-chain, actually pull the pre-image on-chain itself, which takes more time to actually add more transaction fees themselves, right? So typically, payment is actually canceled immediately before, if it can't be settled, it's going to be canceled immediately, maybe on the payment has or whatever else. So HODL HTLCs flip that next is going to cause you to like HODL onto the HTLC for whatever reason. So you're kind of like having like more of like a deferred settlement on the network itself. And yeah, so typically pre-image known, you're going to be there. So like this was kind of like realized in the particular scenario. Let's say like I have like one T-shirt, and basically two people do a payment at the same time for that one T-shirt itself or a sticker or whatever else, right? Depending on who gets there first, one of them is actually going to get the T-shirt, right? But the way the software works currently, it's going to pull that payment immediately. So all of a sudden now we have to deal with a refund. Refunds are kind of difficult in Lightning because because there's kind of like asymmetry in like the network bandwidth, similar to kind of like the internet. Upstream and downstream aren't particularly the same. It may be difficult to actually do that refund. So instead, what if we can actually get the HTLC and then check our inventory and then say, oh, we have one T-shirt, you get it. Oh, well, sorry, the T-shirt's gone, right? That's what kind of like HODL HTLCs are about. So basically, a special type that actually doesn't require the server won't automatically start the payment instantly. Instead, it kind of like has like manual settlement or cancellation of the payment, right? So what's going to happen? Like, so let's say a payment comes in, they get kind of like a notification on their dashboard. It's like we have one payment, can we settle it? This kind of like the manual case. They click yes, and then everything's done. So it's kind of like a way you can actually have different use cases in Lightning that allow you to kind of like take advantage of kind of like the ability to extend a payment off chain that actually show that I have them all the money there and it's fully committed, but then allow it to be canceled or deferred settlement in itself. There's a few different use cases. Let's say one kind of like application layer DOS depends. Let's say you have something like web server reverse proxy. Every single payment you actually have to send to it, you need a HODL HTLC alongside, right? Let's say you basically put up kind of like a bond of like 1,000 satoshis for every single request, and then let's say maybe your request is nefarious or whatever else. This kind of adds like kind of like a tax or kind of like cost to actually go and actually serve. We're going to talk about the pre-dispatch thing. Another cool thing is kind of a cross-chain swap. Let's say someone gives you like an HTLC like on Bitcoin itself, right? And let's say like you're doing some swap or whatever else, maybe some Litecoin. At that point, you basically just like hold the HTLC, get the pre-image somewhere over here, and then actually insert that back into the network and actually get it going. This is cool because this allows you to kind of like do cross-chain swaps without actually modifying anything in in Lightning itself, because it's not really like a native protocol thing. It's more of that, okay, you kind of like upcall this other system, you get the pre-image, then insert it back into the thing itself. And I think people use, I think Spark Swaps uses this now. We use it for submarine swaps in Lightning Loop and a few other things. Another cool thing you can have is maybe kind of like super resistance itself. Let's say you were doing something, maybe it's like, a coin or something like that, you wanted to make accounts partially costly. What you can do, you can actually have an individual always extend a HODL HTLC to you, and that kind of acts like an opportunity cost, right? So all of a sudden now they have to actually spend their funds in order to access the service, which kind of lets you rate them a little bit more and to actually incur some costs to ensure that someone can't just spend like 1,000 different IDs or whatever and access your service at once. And that's it. Questions on this or anything else? Question? Yeah.
Let's say my phone's running that cron job to pay every month
Yep.
I drop my phone in the toilet.
Yeah.
Does the data associated with that recurring payment still live somewhere, or do I need to set that back up?
So you need to set it back up on a new device. Temperatures are basically like the electric company or whatever else will actually still have the payment descriptor somewhere in your settings. You can go back into your settings and then reinitialize it itself. But you can also manage, let's say you have a Casa box or something like that, or some other server or else. You can actually have that box protected online all the time. Do that recurring payment for you. Maybe your phone's just kind of monitoring. Okay, I paid my bills or whatever given time. So it does depend on something that's online, which they would make that payment in that particular period of time, just because there's a push system and not they can't pull the money instantaneously from you. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. If not, thank you all for listening.